Thank you so much for joining us today for EB-MUD's Landscape Advisory Committee General Meeting with a panel discussion on decorative lawn, otherwise known as non-functional turf, watering ban AB 1572. My name is Kristen Bowman, and I'm an EB-MUD Water Conservation Program Manager, and I will be facilitating today's discussion. Before we get going, just a couple announcements. This is a recorded webinar, so by participating, you do agree to be on a recorded webinar. Everyone is muted and their cameras off. You are invited to use the chat, primarily to talk amongst yourselves and share resources. And if you could use a Q&A button for questions for the panelists. We will be sending out this recording and also links to the resources that we talk about. We're going to have the panel discussion and then the Q&A will come at the end. Before we begin, just a few announcements to save the date. February 29th, 9 to 12, Valley Water will be hosting their Landscape Summit, and this is in San Jose. This will be a hybrid event. Valley Water will also be offering a conversation on AB 1572. And so if you'd like to talk about that in person, that's a good place to go. And then also Allied Landscape is hosting a landscape water use symposium in Fremont, and that's February 13th, another in-person event. If you'd like to talk more amongst yourselves in person about AB 1572, they'll also be covering a lot of other topics at those events. EB-MUD is offering the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Training and Certification Program. This is free. It's online March 11th through the 14th and March 18th through the 21st, 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Also put on your calendars the Water Conservation Showcase, which will be in San Ramon. It's also hybrid and free. This is an opportunity to gather with advocates and researchers and business leaders, product manufacturers, to engage in some presentations and exhibits and network with your peers. And there's also a free lunch. And with the spring coming, there's a great number of garden tours to get out and get some inspiration for some beautiful regenerative landscapes. Ruth Bancroft will be hosting their garden tour April 29th, and then Bring Back the Natives garden tour is May 4th and 5th. Speaking of beautiful landscapes, the gardens at Heather Farm Climate Discovery Garden is now done. It was a renovation process, and many people provided in-kind services and donations to renovate this demonstration garden. It will also be part of the Ruth Bancroft garden tour. EB-MUD is also looking into possibly having a demonstration garden at Lafayette Reservoir, so we'll keep you in touch with that. Many of you are familiar with EB-MUD's landscape rebates. We offer rebates to change lawn to a low water regenerative landscape to help. We've been doing this for quite some time, but also to help with this non-functional turf law. We have a standard rebate that's $1 per square foot and a super rebate at $2 a square foot. The super rebate really combines best practices of sheet mulching and adding compost and using California native plants. We also offer a rebate for takeout lawn in median strips. Median strips are super hard to water efficiently, and that's $2 a square foot. Our rebate for commercial properties used to have a ceiling of $15,000. We raised it to $20,000 to help with this NFT conversion, the decorative lawn conversion. We also offer an irrigation flow sensor rebate, and that's really good to detect leaks like immediately on your irrigation system. You don't have to wait for your bill, and also to measure your water use. We just finished our first year of our Landscape Design Assistance Program. So our Landscape Design Assistance Program helps customers with that design aspect of moving from a lawn to a low water garden, which can kind of be a barrier for people. We had a great success with that with most of our residential customers who are working with our rebate program, also tapping into the landscape design assistance program. Just a call out for volunteers if you're interested, the water use classification of landscape species. This is a database, is looking for industry professionals to review updates. And if you want to be considered for that, you just go to WCAL's landing page and you can sign up to be a reviewer. For EB Mud water supply, we're doing quite well. As you recall, last year we had a ton of rain all over the state, and we're at 81% full, which is 111% of average. So we're above average in our storage throughout our system. Our precipitation levels are a little bit below average. The rain started a little bit later this year, with McCallum River watershed at 75% of average and locally 67%. Our gross production level, that means like how much water are we using? We're at a little bit of an uptick from last year. So this graph below, the blue shows you in 2005, 2007, how much water we were using. You can see the peaks are in the summer, and then it drops down in the winter due to the irrigation use in the warmer periods. And then the green shows last year. So you can see it's way below 2005. And often when we go through a drought, a lot of those behaviors and systems are kind of created as part of a culture, and people just adopt them long term, which is great. We did have a little bit of an uptick from 2023, maybe because the rain came in a little bit later. But just as a reminder, all irrigation should be off right now. It is the winter. We have plenty of rain, and the statewide drought emergency, which was put in place in 2022, is still in place through 2024, which prohibits irrigating commercial non-functional turf with drinking water. And as a reminder, EBMUD offers water budget reports for irrigation only accounts. And if you're not receiving those reports for your irrigation only account, please let us know. They're super helpful. They look at your square footage and your location and give you a ballpark of where you should be, how much water you should be using in your landscape. So diving into our conversation on decorative lawn and non-functional turf, we have four presenters to help us with this conversation today. And I just want to call out, I know the term non-functional turf, and that is used in the law, can be a little bit confusing because turf, sometimes people think of artificial turf. As it's stated in AB 1572, turf is referring to lawn or grass. So we also kind of refer to it as decorative lawn. And Krista Guerrero from the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, she's going to work with us to talk a little bit more about what is non-functional and functional lawn or turf. Krista was involved in helping to kind of formulate this law. She's going to tell us a little bit about the background and also the phased approach. Provide us a demonstration of their GIS platform that they're using as a tool to help prioritize conversions, and also talking about the multiplier effect study that they did, which really kind of demonstrates once you start getting going with this and make some beautiful regenerative landscapes, other people follow. And then we have Erin Smith with the City of Alameda. She's a public works director, and we'll be talking about the long-term planning that was involved for the City of Alameda to convert decorative lawn to regenerative landscapes, how she involved the community in some cost and maintenance considerations. And then Julie Saare-Edmonds with the Department of Water Resources will talk about how AB 1572 and the Model Water Efficient Landscape overlaps for those of you who are working with MWELO. And then Karina Herrera from the State Water Resources Control Board. Super glad to have them here with us today, really to listen in on the conversation and to weigh in as best as she can at this time about reporting and enforcement, and how AB 1572 and the long-term framework. Some of you may not be familiar with that term. The long-term framework is really designed for utilities as a pathway to figure out water use over time, and kind of gives water use budgets specifically to the utilities. And then we'll end with the summary Q&A. And then if you wouldn't mind, there's a 3-question survey at the end that you'll receive, and would love to hear your feedback. So starting with it, Krista, would you like to start us off on this conversation?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristen. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. As Kristen said, I work for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, and we were one of the co-sponsors of AB 1572. So we sort of set all of this in motion and got you here today. Next slide, please. So the big question is always, why are we addressing non-functional turf, or where did this come from? The term itself, of course, did not come from Metropolitan. It actually didn't even come from really California. It's something that's been sort of bouncing around mostly the Western states for a while now, several years. And as the need has arisen, different states and different agencies have taken action to handle this topic. So next slide. So Metropolitan, we are the nation's largest wholesaler of water. We're essentially, if you look at a map, all of urban and suburban Southern California. So we have the majority of the water supply in California itself. We provide water to the most people, and we use the most amount of water. So we look very closely at our water supply, of course, and where does it come from? And how available is it? We are making lots of strides in local resource projects and in alternative water supply, but our main supply sources are still the two main imported water supplies, one being the Northern Sierras and the State Water Project, and then the other being the Colorado River. Now, the Colorado River has been in shortage for a very long time, and it will continue to be, even with our wonderfully wet winter that did help us out on the State Water Project. We had a similar-ish wet winter on the Colorado, but still nowhere near enough to get us out of that constant shortage. The reality of the Colorado River for us is essentially that it's over-allocated. So there's more, people have more right to the water than there is actually water in the Colorado. So Metropolitan is trying to be an active supporter of changes to the agreement for the Colorado River and understanding, how can we make this sustainable, not deplete the river, essentially. And the way that we went about that was that we signed a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, on August 24th of 2022 with several other Colorado River water users. So different cities, tribes, states, sort of all coming together to try to say, we're going to make some big changes. And one of the big changes that we made was a promise to reduce the amount of non-functional turf in our service area by 30% through replacement with drought and climate resilient landscaping, while understanding that we need landscapes for healthy environments. We need trees. We want to continue to benefit wildlife and the environment. When I show you our turf dashboard just a bit later, you'll understand how big of a promise 30% is, because it's a huge number and there are no deadlines. So it doesn't say we promise to remove 30% by a year from now, or 5 or even 10 years. It's a goal, and it's a goal that we're working very actively to try to achieve. And AB 1572 is going to help us with that. And then as also another item that we took on at the same time, we do not have customers. We just have our 26 member agencies who purchase water from us. So we don't have the ability to impact customer behavior or to give them rules or regulations. So all Metropolitan's board was able to do is we passed a resolution that would encourage our municipalities, so the actual cities and water agencies that do have that power, to ban the irrigation of non-functional turf with potable water. This was done well before the passing of AB 1572. So it was our first step in that direction to get us to AB 1572. Next slide. So because I was one of the key people who assisted in writing AB 1572, I get to tell you what it's about and how it works. Understand that the language is, legislative language, right? So it's the direction that the state board needs to take, but it will be up to the state board to get into the nitty-gritty details and to actually say how they're going to do things and how it's going to work. So none of that necessarily is built in here. So a lot of those questions on the how and the why and the when, well, not necessarily the why, but the how and the when, are not answered yet, because those are the responsibility of the State Water Resource Control Board. So what is AB 1572? Essentially boiled down, it bans the irrigation of non-functional turf with potable water on CII properties. So it's CII. So it's commercial, industrial, and institutional properties. So it completely excludes residential. And that's the first thing off the bat. It also excludes cemeteries because the idea behind a cemetery and the grass in the cemetery is that it would be functional. So instead of nitpicking around cemeteries, we just excluded it fully from the bill. And very important to Metropolitan, one of the things that we had to have in order to sign on as a co-sponsor was the removal of multifamily housing. We certainly did not want to impact any underserved communities, areas that have low green space, and wanted to make sure that multifamily housing, apartment buildings, particularly low-income housing, was protected. So that has also been removed from this bill. It does, however, include schools, homeowners associations, institutional properties, which more commonly are called public agency properties. So you're looking at courthouses, city halls, really anything that would be considered public property, parks, industrial properties, and then common interest developments, which is essentially very similar to an HOA, but slightly different. And please don't ask me the exact difference between the two because I have to have the definitions in front of me to know that. And an exception is made for tree health. So while you do have this ban for these types of properties, if you have or have to run your turf irrigation in order to keep trees alive, that is allowed in the bill. It's very important also to point out this is potable water only. So if a property is irrigated with recycled water, they're not included in this as well. They could continue to irrigate. So the first question that always comes up is, well, what is non-functional turf? And actually, when we were developing the bill, that took us the longest, was to come up with a definition of non-functional turf. And maybe you could look at it as sort of going about it from the back end, but we decided that non-functional turf is any turf that is not functional. And then we decided to actually define functional turf. That was a simpler thing to do. So functional turf is any turf that's located in a recreational use area or a community gathering space. So essentially, and that is a shortened definition, but essentially what it is if that grass is being used for play, for concerts, meetings, any kind of gathering, or for people to functionally use as in not just mowing the lawn on a regular basis or walking across it to get to the front of a building and go in the door, but actually being used actively for its own space, that's considered functional. And then non-functional is everything else. Now, those are gray areas, of course, because it's very easy to look at a certain small piece of grass somewhere and go, okay, well, no one's going to sit and have lunch on that. It's right next to the street. Maybe that's a little bit simpler. However, when you get into schools in particular or parks, it gets a little tricky, right? Then you have to nitpick at the different pieces of grass and say, this is where they eat lunch, so this is functional. This is maybe where they're only walking across it to get to their car to leave for the day. That's not really functional. So it goes, and we'll look at that. I'll show you some examples as well, and you'll start to see where those gray areas might come in and where you're going to have to be very clear on how is this grass used. Let me take a look at it. And now is a great time to do that, to start actually looking at pieces of turf on properties and thinking, okay, has anybody ever actually played on this, had a meeting, at a concert, done anything that would be considered a functional use? Next slide. So here's some public property examples. These, I would say 2 out of 3 are really easy. So the first one you're seeing in the top left is the Simi Valley Welcome Corner, they call it. So this was City of Simi Valley. You're driving down the street, you're coming into Simi Valley from a different city, and it's their big, hi, welcome to Simi Valley, you're here. It's just a corner between 2 streets. Again, nobody's playing on it. Nobody's using it for anything. It was just a grass area that had their city sign on it. And so they were able to go in, identify that as non-functional, and they've already taken that out. Actually, I don't have any after pictures, but they did take it out, and it's actually beautiful what they've put in its place. The bottom picture that you're seeing, now that generally is relatively easy. We have heard discussion on this, but generally we consider parkways and medians to be non-functional. right? You're very close to the street. If it's a median, you're literally in the middle of the street. So 9 times out of 10, that's straightforward as non-functional and will no longer allowed to be irrigated and should be replaced, hopefully. And then your top right photo, it's hard to tell what that building is. It's actually a fire department office. And they had a big grass area where they were parking like other cars and smaller fire trucks and kind of using for exercise. They went ahead and took all of that out. That was their decision. That really wasn't considered functional. They didn't need that grass. It was just a large grass area around their fire department office. So they did take that out. So again, another piece of what would be considered non-functional turf. The grass around buildings, city halls, things like that, usually able to be considered non-functional. Next slide. So this is commercial property. Again, these are pretty straightforward. So you see the one all the way on the left, that is a commercial building, like a warehouse type building. They just have huge expanses of grass around the building near the parking lot. Possibly if they wanted to make the argument that they did staff training out there, staff meetings, something like that, they could keep parts of that grass. I wouldn't say you could keep the whole thing, but maybe a small portion. In this case, they didn't. They did take this grass out, but I'm telling you that there could be some wiggle room in there if they were using a portion of it, but generally, no. Generally, you have staff meetings inside in a conference room, and you wouldn't need that grass. And then you have two that are very straightforward, in my opinion. You have the gas station, and you have with the little strip around the gas station, which, as you can see right now, that picture where it's being watered, that's a huge waste of water. You have way more sprinkler overspray that covers that grass area. So it's a perfect candidate of, look, this is what we're trying to get rid of for AB 1572. We're trying to get rid of this wasteful water areas where you have so much overspray and so much waste, and this shouldn't be irrigated. And then the same thing on the bottom picture. That is a strip mall, again, with just small pieces of grass. Generally, a strip mall, people are going to and from the buildings. They're doing their shopping, going to their cars. They're not stopping to, play in that grass area. Next slide. And then HOA properties. We know for a lot of HOAs, there are places where children play. There are places where they do have functional turf that they need to use, but there are lots of small patches of grass, particularly in HOAs, around, as you can see in the picture on the right, around the actual homes, the townhouses, the buildings that really aren't being used for anything. So those would be categorized as non-functional, and through AB 1572 could not be irrigated. The example on the left, again, this was a property because of how sloped that grass was, not really very useful for play or anything along those lines. If you were kicking a ball, it would go into the street, not very safe. So another area that could be categorized as non-functional and would need to be, could not be irrigated, and hopefully the grass would be removed. Next slide. So school property is, of course, where we get real tricky. Schools and parks are the hard ones. But I think even in schools and parks, you see some places where you do see the logic of this is not the main grass area, right? So particularly if you look at the top right, and you see that sort of triangle of grass near the parking lot, there's a tree in it. Yes, we want to protect the tree. Hope maybe we can put it on its own valve so that it looks very established and mature. So it probably could even just be hand watered moving forward. It doesn't really need a whole sprinkler system. But that grass, again, this is not the area of grass where the children are going to come out and do PE or have their lunch or do something like that. They're going to have recess in this little triangle area. So that would be non-functional on school property. Similar on the bottom picture, you're seeing along the lines of the same thing. In that very far, it's a small picture, I apologize. In the very far background, you do see a larger grass area, which would probably be considered functional. But then you have these smaller chunks in the front near the fencing and near the benches. Probably don't need all of that area. It's probably not the area where the school children are actually using it for recess or anything along those lines. And so if you look at that overhead view, this is an important distinction. So if you look at that overhead view, you can see there's some larger grass areas on either side of the building, those would be that gray area that I talked about, right? So that would be the property owner, the school district, the maintenance person, the principal, taking a look at these properties, right? We're not just going to say, yes, no, it's next to a building, it's definitely not being used. We don't know that. The state board doesn't know that. But the people who are actually on that property every day do know. So maybe they know the one on the right that's sort of off by itself, that likely not being used or probably not being used. That would be a call for them to make and say, you know what, we don't ever see children over on that piece of grass, so we can take that. You know, we wouldn't irrigate that. That's non-functional. But maybe over on the left, where you just have those two patches and you have a walkway in between, that is used more for gathering space. Okay, then that part you would irrigate and that part you would keep. So again, it's not cut and dry. There is a lot of work that needs to be done looking at properties like this and making those determinations. Next slide. So how will this be implemented? Again, State Water Resource Control Board is responsible for that. And so the full understanding of how it will be implemented is not out yet. But this is what's written in the legislation. So there is a timeline for compliance. Starting in January of 2027, public properties that are not considered disadvantaged communities, and there are what we call DAC overlays, which show, you know, if you're in a DAC area or not. So any public property that's not in a DAC area has to start complying by January of 2027. So that would be, they'd have to turn their irrigation off. For January 2028, it moves to commercial properties. January 2029 to HOAs and those common interest developments. And then January of 2031 is the earliest that public properties in disadvantaged communities would have to comply. But it is based on funding being available, because of course what we don't want is for people to turn off the irrigation at these cities and these low income areas, and then everything dies and they don't have the money to replace it with something that's drought tolerant and still beautiful and functional. So there's that change. But you will note, and I want to point this out, it's only public properties that get that. So if you are a HOA or a commercial property in a disadvantaged area, there is no concession for that. You do just comply with the regular timeline. So it also states in legislation that by June 30th of 2030, the property owner would self-certify the compliance for their properties. So essentially that's the moment when you would say, send something into the State Water Resource Control Board and say, we are no longer irrigating. This is our non-functional turf. This is how much we have. We have stopped irrigating it. Again, we don't have exactly what that looks like yet. Enforcement itself can either be by the State Water Resource Control Board or the local water agencies. So local water agencies will be helping with this and could be also part of this process. Next slide. So now I'm going to show you and talk about our turf dashboard. So Metropolitan, since we are not a local water supplier, we don't technically have any say in this, and we don't have any anything that we're going to need to do, but we try to help our member agencies and the local agencies as much as possible. So what we did was created a turf dashboard with Planetscape AI that will find the baseline of how much non-functional turf there is in our service area. These are estimates, and we were able to break it down by our 26 member agencies. So essentially, it's a starting point for our member agencies, for the local agencies, to look at a property and say functional, non-functional, needs to comply with AB 1572, does not. It's not detailed enough for it to be 100%, but it's a good start. Next slide. So essentially what we did was we standardized the land use codes from a couple different sources into 17 common land uses. And then we categorized and calculated how much square footage was in each of those categories. And then the user itself, which I'll show you in a minute, will be able to select different categories and make your own definition of non-functional turf. So you could make the definition that it's just commercial and institutional and just see how much that is, right? Without getting into the detail of the public properties, the schools and parks and things of that nature. Or you add those in and then you get a different number. Next slide. Essentially, Planetscape was able to go in and look at the overlay imagery, the aerial imagery, and make a determination, you know, what's concrete, what's turf, what's something other than concrete and turf so that it make those very clear distinctions. And we were able to calculate how much turf there actually was in our service area. Next slide. So this is essentially what it looks like, but what I want to do is actually show you in real time what it looks like. So we'll skip past this. And I will show you now.
You want me to stop share?
Yeah, I think we had it somewhere else, but this seems like the right spot to actually show it to everybody. Okay.
So as Chris is getting this ready, we don't quite have this ready up here in EB Mud area, but I thought it was interesting to see what they were doing to help solve, you know, the tools that they were using in Southern California to address this AB 1572. So this is just like food for thought, you know, as we get our own ideas together about how to approach it here in the Bay. So Chris is going to show us that.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so this is our turf dashboard. What you'll see are two numbers right off the bat. Those are always the first two things people focus on. We have a number for total non-functional turf and a total for functional turf. Now, what I did specifically was to go in and make decisions on categories. So this is not the total amount of turf in metropolitan service area if you add these two numbers together. This is as best as we could with the information we had, what categories I would put as NFT and what categories I would put as functional. And then how much, what's the square footage of that? So now you're looking at metropolitan service area. We have just under 900 million square feet of non-functional turf. So again, if you think back to our MOU for Colorado River, we have promised to try our best to remove 30% of that. That is a huge number. It's taken us 30 years to remove 215 million square feet. So you can do the math and figure out how long this is going to take us to do. But we're trying our best. So this is the main page. And then when you go to the actual dashboard, these are our 26 member agencies. If I zoomed in, you could actually see each of the land use codes. But what you see here are the land uses that you can choose from. And over here, what you have is an output table that tells you exactly how many square feet are in each of those categories. So if I wanted to make, to adjust that, so let's say, for example, we know that most of our turf is functional, and actually most of it is in residential. So if I wanted to know just how much was residential turf, excuse me, there we go, for multifamily and single family together, of the billions of square feet of turf, 3 billion of it is residential turf and likely will never be touched to any great extent because it's considered functional. So right off the bat, we know that there's 3 billion square feet of turf that's going to be staying around that we need to have water for. So that's one thing I can look at. I could also go in, like I said, and I could say, well, let me see commercial. It's a little hard to do on this small. Commercial, and let me take a look at transportation, which is a lot of the parkways and the medians, and anything else I would want to add in here. A little hard, and it will give me just those categories. So our member agencies can go into this dashboard and they can make their own determination on what they think non-functional turf is. And they can add up just those categories and find out how much non-functional turf they have in their service area. As I said, I've already done that on the main page for Metropolitan and our entire service area, but any other user can go in and make their own determinations as well. I won't go into it here. You have a lot of other presentations, but we also have the ability to filter by disadvantaged community areas and local agencies as well. So that's just a very quick look at our dashboard. We'll go back to the presentation.
Oh, hold on. Oops.
So this is older data that we had before we just had our dashboard updated. So previous versions, which had an older version of aerial imagery, showed about 1.2 billion square feet of non-functional turf, which would amount to about 13% of all the turf in our service area. Next slide. So that was the demonstration. I showed it to you. So then quickly, I just want to go over another study that we did. We did a multiplier effect study. Next slide. To look at, when we rebate for somebody to take out their grass and put in turf, or put in drought tolerant landscaping, what effect does that have on the surrounding areas, on the different neighborhoods? Are we seeing some sort of multiplier effect where for every one that we pay for, we get a couple for free? So we did this study. We selected 20 different areas and 360 parcels, and chose, again, 3 areas that had no rebate participants at all, so that we could use them as sort of as a control. And then next slide. And then we looked at each of these areas and mapped out the actual rebate participants for our turf replacement program. And then the green dots were people who also had drought tolerant landscaping or had installed recently drought tolerant landscaping, but did not apply for a rebate. And so the darker the color means the higher concentration of program participants and then surrounding areas. So you can sort of see that clump that comes together, where when you have multiple properties that are all doing the rebate program, you're seeing more multiple properties that are also doing the same landscaping, but without the rebate. And it's important to point out, this is residential, so this would be not impacted by AB 1572, not required. We did a similar, at the same time, we did look at the commercial properties, but we were not seeing a strong enough correlation for us to put it in the final result. Essentially, what we noticed was commercial properties do impact other commercial properties. So if one commercial property does it, surrounding commercial properties are more likely to do it, but not nearly to the same extent that a residential property is impacted by another residential property. And we didn't see any crossover. So a commercial property or a public building that has drought tolerant landscaping did not seem to influence surrounding residential properties to do the same thing. So next slide. But the final impact was that for every 100 turf rebate participants, we saw an additional 132 parcels that converted because of our people who participated in the program, even though they didn't get a rebate. So we are definitely getting that multiplier effect. Next slide, and I believe that is it. And I will be around for the whole thing so I can answer questions, but I know we have a lot of other great presentations to get to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krista. That was really interesting. Around that multiplier effect is a way to introduce Erin Smith with the City of Alameda. I have heard a number of HOAs say that they have gone to the City Hall and taken pictures and brought them back to their HOA to present as ideas of something other than lawn. So there is that connection maybe with an HOA, which is considered commercial, with a municipal building. And with that, I'd like to introduce Erin Smith.
Thank you for that introduction, Kristen. I am City of Alameda's Public Works Director, and was happy to have been invited to sit on this panel of really smart, verse people in doing converting non-functional turf to drought-tolerant landscape. I'm mostly here to share our recent work converting 2 of our sites, our City Hall and our City Hall West. Yes, we have 2 City Halls. And I'm going to talk about, while the work was just done now, it's really a result of many, many years of working with our council. So shown here are pre-photos. So that on the left, for those familiar with the city, City Hall West is out at our old naval base. It's a pretty large site, it's 29,000 square feet. The gone lawn now, since the work is done, surrounded the building on all 4 sides. Shown on our right is our downtown City Hall location, a little bit smaller in size, 9,000 square feet. So next slide. So there's a lot of text on this slide, but like I said, this is the culmination of many years of working with our city council that really started back in 2014 when then Governor Jerry Brown actually had first had 20% voluntary reductions in water use. And at that time, staff took the opportunity to present the state of affairs to our council and propose reductions in municipal water use. So we're not talking about overall City of Alameda water use, but water use used for municipal purposes, parks, city buildings, medians, things like that. And council at that time decided to make what we were proposing to meet the voluntary requirements required. So they said, go forth, do these things, which put us in a really good position when in 2015, Governor Brown made those reductions required. So we were in a really good position to report on our 29% water reduction, primarily from overall reductions in irrigation, but doing a lot of repair work on irrigation systems that had leaks. Fast forward a few years, the city adopted a climate action and resiliency plan, a pretty comprehensive plan that looks at both greenhouse gas reduction, but also rising waters, both sea level rise and groundwater rise, and adopt some pretty visionary goals related to building resiliency in the city of Alameda. One of those goals was to move away from water intensive scapes to more drought tolerant scapes as a means of building resiliency. And then 2 years later, there was the drought emergency when Governor Newsom was in place. And so in late 21, we proposed additional measures to our council to reduce water use. And it was in the fall of 21 that we first proposed some measures that had some upfront costs. So converting, we were calling it lawn, but non-functional turf at municipal building sites and some areas of our parks that it was non-functional turf. So we presented that to council, and we really presented it in the context of the resiliency goals that they had adopted a few years prior. And luckily our council said, go forth with these measures. And we picked off our two, I'd call them our flagship sites. That's our City Hall and City Hall West. And just to add to the complexity and timeline shown here, both of those sites are designated historic sites. So that required us to make a stop at our historic advisory board to obtain a certificate of approval. And we did that shortly after council's go in September. But the historic advisory board had such significant comments for our City Hall West site that at that time they only issued the go forth for City Hall. And the reason really was our City Hall West site is part of a larger designated historic district. It has a cultural landscape report. So they had some pretty good feedback for us to ensure that the new drought tolerant landscape situated well with the historic character. On a parallel path of seeking those approvals from our historic advisory board, we really wanted to ensure that the community was involved in this. And so we launched a website, and we have a great public information officer who was able to just even push out the website, which was really informational at first, also really messaging the East Bay Mud rebate. I failed to mention that was another part of our motivating reason to go to council in 21 was East Bay Mud's super rebate. We have taken advantage of that and felt that was, a nice thing to go after. So on our website, we launched a website, let the community know what we were doing with these two sites, put a link to the East Bay Mud website. And then eventually when we had what we would call our plant palette from our landscape designer, we did launch an online survey and hosted a community meeting, and that is for both sites. So we definitely got some feedback in both venues, but mostly the survey. A lot of it really pushing for native plants, which we were well positioned to meet those comments in that East Bay Mud Super Rebate requires 50% of the plants to be native. So that felt really good and nicely aligned. So after that, finally now in May of 2022, we're a public agency. We have to go through a very formal bidding process. We did all that. And then we moved forward with City Hall first, did that in May. Again, on a parallel path, while that work was going forward, we did go back to our historic advisory board, got the go for City Hall West. finished the work at City Hall, and literally we are working through our punch list with our contractor right now at City Hall West. So it's been, you know, 9 years of, you know, talking about this, maybe not in the same context of the new law and not requiring watering, but certainly in the context of the city's climate action goals. Next slide. So just a quick overview. I'm happy to talk offline with anybody that wants to kind of do a deeper dive into the projects, but we did hire one landscape architect that did both sites for us. Probably have spent about $60,000, and that helped us from design and conception all the way through construction. Our City Hall site, if you remember, that was the 9,000 square foot site. That was $200,000, and our City Hall West site, that was 29,000, was 460,000. So obviously ongoing maintenance is super important to us. These are not our typical landscapes that we're used to maintaining. So I do want to say we are thinking about this. We've currently, our City Hall site, we added to our existing landscape contractor that we're already using. However, we really want to be sure that the maintenance contractor that we use going forward does have the rescape maintenance qualifications. So we're contemplating whether to do a new solicitation for these services and or work with our existing contractor to ensure that they obtain the qualifications that we're seeking. Next slide. So no need to see the table. My eyes aren't that great to see all the numbers, but I did just want to just end on, you know, here's the overall list of what we presented to our council of what we had identified then as lawn that could be subject to conversion to a more drought tolerant scape. So we did present the number and cents to our council because that's clearly important, and we presented what the estimated water reductions are, clearly important, but we really emphasized and put in context of how this work builds resiliency. And I have a quote here that I'll read. This was in the staff report that we used that ultimately council approved going forward with this work. And we noted that 3% of the nation's energy is used to pump and treat water. So conserving water conserves energy, and that reduces greenhouse gas pollution. In addition, the frequency, intensity, and duration of drought events is expected to increase with climate change. Implementing measures that lead to permanent water use reductions will build resiliency in the face of climate change. So again, just acknowledging, you know, putting this work in a broader resiliency context really was the key to success for the city of Alameda. And that's my last slide.
Thank you so much. And, you know, she shared, that was excellent. Thank you so much, Erin. And yeah, the long-term planning obviously seemed like it was essential for particularly a municipal landscape. And also the costs that she talks about, they aren't cheap, right? They look like some pretty heavy numbers. It's also in the context of prevailing wage, which a lot of private companies wouldn't have to abide by the prevailing wage. We'd like to run a poll just to find out from, you know, many of you have been doing these regenerative landscapes, taking lawn to low water gardens for like the last 20 years now, and just run a quick poll on what has been most helpful for you. What has been most helpful to convert lawn to a low water regenerative landscape? And just to pick one, is it buy-in from the community and a community champion, knowledgeable staff, funding and rebates, or long-term planning? I think in Erin's case, it was long-term planning that really allowed this to happen. And I've heard things from other people. So thank you for participating in this. We'll give it just one more minute. And yeah, if you don't feel like yours is up there, please put in the other, feel free to put your thoughts in the chat. Okay, I think we can end the poll and then share the results. So yeah, buy-in from the community, Project Champion. We've heard that that is like super important. I asked an HOA recently how they got their 9,000 square feet converted, and they said it was the landscape committee that really made it happen. And then, as Erin mentioned, knowledgeable staff. So, you know, I like the idea of training up your existing staff, and there's a lot of opportunities through Quell and Rescape and California Native Plant Society. I think Ruth Bancroft Garden also has a training program now. So lots of opportunity out there. But with all this conversion, we do need to build new, you know, build up our staff skills. And then funding and rebates, absolutely, 43%. I see that that is super important. And long-term planning is also really important. We're going to send you a link to this, but the Bureau of Reclamation does have Water Smart grants to convert lawn to low water gardens. And we'll be sending some of that information to you as a follow-up link. Thank you. And we will move on to Julie. Thank you, Julie. So some of you work with a model water efficient landscape ordinance when you are building new landscapes or doing a big renovation, and it comes through EB-MUD when you put in a new water meter. We also review your landscape plans, but we just wanted to find out, how does this non-functional turf law of relate to the moderate water efficiency ordinance? And Julie Saare-Edmonds from Department of Water Resources is here to share that with us.
Hi, thank you. Happy rainy Monday to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to turn on all the lights because it's so dark with the clouds here. So how do they relate? Right now, MWELO and the non-functional turf potable watering ban or requirement don't relate too much right now. That will probably change in the future. MWELO, well, there's a couple of reasons. MWELO is a land use planning tool, and cities and county land use authorities are the ones that implement it. Rather, the AB 1572 is in the water code, which means water suppliers tend to be the implementers. Sometimes land use authority can also be a supplier, like in Sacramento and Roseville and other places. But there's different entities within those cities that are following these different rules and laws because of who the authorities are granted to. So that's one difference. Right, the MWELO has traditionally always used a water budget approach, and there's also a provision in statute that says any plant may be used as long as it meets the water budget. So there's no ban on anything other than noxious weeds, which is a federal ban anyway. So there is no prohibitive language in MWELO regarding turf grass. The water budget is pretty tight, with the adjustment factors were lowered during the 2015 drought, and for CII, the adjustment factor is down to 0.45. So you can see in these two different options where I describe it. In the prescriptive compliance option, which is known as Appendix D, I put the residential section here just to compare. So for residential areas, they can have up to 75% of turf, of non-turf, and 25% of turf. But non-residential areas for CII can have no turf practically. They have to have 100% of the plant area needs to be with a plant factor of 0.3 or less. And there's just not much turf grass out there that has that low of a plant factor. And that, of course, does not include recycled water, which the ban or the AB 1572 does not target. So they can have turf if it's a recycled water SLA. And in the performance option, which is the traditional approach that's been on the book since 1993, the ETF is for CII 0.45. Now they can use a water budget approach. They can put in some turf grass that's ornamental or non-functional. However, it's very hard to do in the water budget. So turf grass that's has a more ornamental value is reserved almost exclusively for residential areas. Did I have another slide? I can't remember if I gave you 2 slides. Oh, I didn't. Okay, so I'll just tell you a couple more. I know I don't have a lot of time because there's a lot of other stuff to talk about. So I think that right now we're going through a rulemaking for MWELO, and at this point we have not proposed to include the provisions of AB 1572 for a couple of reasons. The bill, when we had started all the preliminary work over a year ago, the bill had not passed. Also, if we were to include something with this significant regulatory effect, it would cause us to go through what they call a Sharia, which is standardized regulatory impact assessment. So anytime a rule, a regulation or other law that's written by a local, by a state agency like DWR or the Water Board, if it's $50 million worth of impact statewide, and that can be both either benefit or cost, we have to go through this very lengthy analysis, which takes about a year. And to get ready for that, we would probably spend a couple years getting ready, and then have the analysis, and then a year for rulemaking. So we were going to be needing to update MWELO in 3 years anyway, because we are bound by a separate law that requires us to look at it every 3 years. But also, because of the water use objectives that are being written, the rulemaking is being written right now. We don't know what that's going to look like. And it is the outdoor water use parts of the urban water use objective are based on the principles of MWELO. So we need to make sure all these moving parts are consistent and not in conflict. So there's a lot of reasons why we have not included this in MWELO yet. It was a public comment that was received during our public comment period, which ended last week. So we do have to consider it, and we will make a public response to that comment. And we're still compiling all the comments, so we don't have any information on a possible response at this time. So those are kind of all things to think about. There is also, I think, when the rulemaking for the Water Board gets going, where they have come up with their compliance forms and so on, I think there's going to be a lot of unusual situations that'll have to be worked out. What's functional, what's not functional, as far as non-traditional landscapes, like for example, Capitol Mall in Sacramento, if anybody's familiar with that, is a very large street median. It's about 50 feet wide, and it's covered in turf grass. And normally medians should not have any turf grass because it's difficult to irrigate, difficult to maintain, and really serves no purpose other than ground cover. Capitol Mall is a little bit different, and they actually shut down the roads and have concerts. So I think there's going to be some give and take and a lot of learning when the compliance forms are written as far as what is considered functional and non-functional, because there's some situations, as anybody in the landscape field knows, it's almost infinite possibilities. So I think there'll be some adjustments going forward. But I think that's all I had for you, because we have other people to hear from.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. I mean, it really, and MWELO, it kind of has it already built in, I think, to a certain extent, that it's, but because of the water budget, if you're using the performance compliance option, it's hard to get a lot of turf in there because you'll go over your water budget. And if it's prescriptive, then you really, you can't use it on commercial properties. So there's a lot of alliance already kind of built in without even knowing it. But good point that all those documents do need to align, and we need a little time to get that together. And so lastly, I'd like to invite Karina Herrera from the water boards so kindly joined us today to listen in on this conversation. And they're just coming above water on their the long-term framework. But just Karina, if you have any insight on how AB 1572 might be enforced.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed listening to the presentations and getting a glimpse of some of the questions. I mean, in all honesty, it's a little early for us to talk about how 1572 will be enforced. Some of that enforcement authority is also being given to the public water system, cities and counties, so I'm sure we'll be closely coordinating and working with the local jurisdictions as this gets rolled out. However, as we are thinking about some of the guidance documents and how the form will be compiled and what sort of entries will be part of it, I think it's helpful for us to listen on these conversations and to see what special cases might arise because of what was or wasn't defined in AB 1572. So more to come. I think the questions are starting to roll in, and so still not much I can concretely give at the moment.
Okay, that's okay. I know it's still pretty new. And it's a ways down the road. Part of the reason why we're hosting this event now is because, as you can see from Erin Smith's presentation, it took her almost, was it 8 years to get to get all that going in combination with their climate resiliency plan. And so we know, particularly for municipalities, and I think to some degree, HOAs, long-term planning is super important to get the conversation going for folks. The other question is for water utilities, how does AB 1572 relate to the long-term framework? And the long-term framework is just, you know, for water districts, a path forward which gives benchmarks of how much water they are kind of budgeted in the future. Does AB 1572, would that supersede the long-term framework? I know the long-term framework is still a draft form.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of the rulemaking for the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation. I think two ways in that it touches non-functional turf is that one, the overall objective, which is based on efficiency standards. One of the standards is for dedicated irrigation meters, which may or may not be currently irrigating some non-functional turf, in which case that land would be associated with that water efficiency budget. And then the other component of it is performance measures. I think the current draft regulation, which was released in August, has a performance measure for the ban on non-functional turf. It was drafted and published before AB 1572 was enacted. So I think a future update of the regulation will have some sort of a either removal or alignment with AB 1572. So there will not be two contradicting dates out there. We're just sort of waiting on our board members to direct us on how to align it with AB 1572.
Okay, great. So it sounds like AB 1572 is really the guiding document at this point for probably MWELO and the California Way of Life, otherwise known as the long-term framework.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much. So just in review, some of the take-home messages, I don't know if this is what you guys came up with, but some of the take-home messages I think for these commercial landscapes is really about planning, because often you have a fair amount of stakeholders involved in getting everyone on board takes a fair amount of planning, maybe prioritizing your locations, potentially using some kind of GIS mapping if you're like a city agency to figure out really where are these sites might be helpful, getting community buy-in and political support, lining up your resources, and maybe peer-to-peer mentoring. I know Erin mentioned that she's happy to talk with anyone offline, particularly maybe other city leaders, on how she was able to navigate her projects. And then definitely tap into EBMUD resources and rebates. We have a lot on our ebmud.com WaterSmart, which this is a QR code for it in the bottom right, including DIY videos and planting lists, just lots and lots of resources for those of you who might be interested in DIY. And we're also want to let you know this is kind of a starting place with the conversation, but we're also happy to meet with you in person at account manager meetings or HOA meetings, and definitely follow up with this conversation at Valley Water Landscape Summit, February 29th, or Allied Landscape Water Use Summit in March 13th. Check out Bureau of Reclamation WaterSmart and energy grants. So those are for nonprofits and municipalities can apply for those grants in combination with their water district. And for a break, go on an inspirational garden tour or go visit one of your local demonstration gardens, which you can find at EBMUD Sustainable Landscapes map. And also just for ongoing water conservation, all account holders have access to online data at My Water Reports. And for our irrigation only accounts, please do sign up for our water budget reports to help you stay on top of that. And now we will go to Q&A. I know there's a lot of questions here. Let's see. And I will start with the top. We haven't really. Any suggestions on how to fund projects to convert NFT? Yeah. Yes. So Andrew, I think that Andrew, I don't have all the answers to that, but definitely the WaterSmart grants, and I will be sending a link to that. Also, EBMUD rebates can help with that. And some of the projects can be done in-house if you have the staff, the landscaping staff, and maybe some talented designers can do some of these projects in-house without having to go out. When are you planning, Lou Bendon? When are you planning stakeholder meetings with those charged with implementing changes? We don't actually have planning stakeholder meetings, but that's actually a really good idea, Lou. We should think about that. At this point, we're offering to come to you, to people's their own HOA meetings or account managers meetings. We're certainly available for that. But I kind of like your idea of a stakeholder meeting. That's a good idea too. Who is a landscape architect for the Alameda project?
I'm happy to answer that.
Yep.
We used Gates and Associates. And then, yeah, I think them as a firm, there's a number of architects within that firm, but we actually did a formal solicitation and they were selected based on an internal panel that we had.
Thank you. Jeff, thank you. Common interest developments are often misunderstood. So I wanted to be sure the statute would clearly define responsibility. Krista, are you able to answer anything about that?
Honestly, I'm not sure I hear a question.
Okay.
Common interest developments are included in AB 1572. So if you need clarification on what is a common interest development, like I said, unfortunately, I don't have the definition right in front of me, but you can look it up in the bill language, which I believe somebody did post already.
Okay, I think this one might be good for you too. Nancy Humphrey, thank you. I'm still confused. Is a multifamily MFH property, I think that's multifamily housing property, that has an HOA covered, but one that does not have an HOA not covered? I don't know what that means. Oh, I think there's
a lot of confusion about multifamily properties inside of HOAs. Because generally when you think of an HOA, you think of like single family homes in a big HOA area, but there are HOAs that have like condo buildings and things like that. If it's an HOA, as the way it was written, again, State Water Board can, and Karina, they can make their own decisions, but the way it was written, if there is an HOA covering a property, that is included in AB 1572. So really the only exclusions for multifamily are apartment buildings and any housing, multifamily housing that's not part of an HOA.
What about if HOA wants native grasses instead of turf? Is that allowed?
So it is turf grass that we are focused on. So if an HOA takes out their turf grass as defined actual turf grass and replaces it with native grasses, they could irrigate that. That would be considered a different planting.
What about letting NFTs go dormant during dry months?
I mean, essentially you'd be for AB 1572, once it goes into effect, they're going to be dormant all the time until you replace it because you can't irrigate it at all. So it'll go dormant, then it will die.
Yeah,
There's not an alternative for that.
Yeah, I think, we're kind of promoting shifting from lawn to a regenerative landscape. So we still maintain the multi-benefits of having, these landscapes. But the law doesn't require that. They're just requiring that
No,
water turns off.
that's an important distinction. So
Yeah.
we are hoping, the co-sponsors of the bill are hoping that this does push people to remove their turf and replace it with something else. But it's not required. I did see that there was a question possibly about synthetic turf. The bill also doesn't say when you replace it, what you have to replace it with. Now, most water agencies who do turf replacement rebates, like Metropolitan, don't allow synthetic turf, and they have very specific requirements on what can be put in. But if you're not planning on getting a rebate, the property owner can put whatever they want. Essentially, it's not part of the legislation to say if you replace it, you must replace it with X, Y, or Z. Nor do you have to replace it. You could just let it die and it will just be dead grass in front of your property.
What is EB-MUD's take on the legislation? We haven't really taken a position on the legislation, quite honestly. We do see taking lawn and turning it into regenerative landscape is a good idea for long-term climate change, and as we experience longer and more frequent droughts. In terms of, yes, we are always offering ongoing education. So we posted on our events page, but in most the Quell event in March is our upcoming event to help people with that. And we haven't really, because the water boards are still trying to figure out enforcement, we're not quite there yet about what the district's role would be in terms of enforcement. So I kind of answered that. And then curious to hear from Erin how the City of Alameda tackled leaks to achieve their 29% reduction in 2015. We are currently working to develop workforce leak detection and repair training for landscapers, and this experience would be super helpful in forming training. Thanks. Lisa at CalWAP. Lisa Coulier. Did you have a quick synopsis of how you found your leaks, Erin?
I don't specifically today. I'm happy to follow up and put her in touch with those that were more directly involved in that kind of work. I do know now what we're doing now is working towards either working with East Bay Mud to have smart meters put on our irrigation only account so that we have that hourly data. I do know that earlier, Kristen, I think, or somebody presented earlier that if not provided by East Bay Mud as a smart meter, there's downstream equipment that you can essentially install that allows that hour by hour tracking of your water use. So that's where we're focused now. We still have leaks and we're finding like we're learning about them a month later when we get the bill. So I don't have a ton of detail for you. I was more focused on the conversions, but I am more than happy to put you in touch with our staff that have done a lot of that work.
Rebecca, for the UC Verde grass, I'm not sure if they're really if they have gotten down to that level yet of about specific grasses, and it might be district by district, you know, whether or not it's allowable by 1572 and or a district's rebate program, because we're all in different climate zones. So I have to go back at look at our rebate, but I don't think we're allowing UC Verde or only in, you know, kind of site by site evaluation. We may approve that. Is it required for a maintenance company to have a landscape contractor's license to qualify to do maintenance on commercial properties? Does anyone want to weigh in on that? I would say you want to have a landscape contractor have a license. Is it required? I would want them to have a license is my answer to that. I don't know if there's any kind of legality around that, but I would go for having a license to do the maintenance, because maintenance can be a little tricky, particularly when you're talking about low water gardens, not mow and blow. It's a little bit of a different knowledge base for that.
And Kristen, anytime there's more than I think it's $500 worth of work done and with materials, you need to be licensed as a contractor. But the business and profession code would outline all that, and the California license, let's see, contractors licensing, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the acronym. CSLB, Contractor State Licensing Board, oversees the licensure of C27. So they would have all that information about the thresholds that when you need to have a licensed contractor.
This is Erin from Alameda. I certainly don't want to weigh in on how other cities manage, but we do require C27 for any landscape contractor working on our municipal sites, including the construction work for the conversion.
Yeah, so we got a few other answers in that. And then apologies for going back to this. So if there is an HOA for condos, if there's an HOA for condos, not individual family homes, but multi-unit buildings, the common areas are treated differently than an apartment building that is designed the same way. Are you able to tease that, Krista? I don't know if Krista's still here.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. See that one from Navarre?
Let me take a look at it. Yeah, so it does sound, I don't know. I know that it sounds strange to say that really just the presence of an HOA makes a difference. But that is essentially how it was written. So it's the presence of the HOA or the designation as the common interest development that puts it within AB 1572. Anything that does not fall under those designations, doesn't have an HOA, that is multifamily building, an apartment building, condo building would also qualify if it wasn't part of an HOA, but mostly apartment buildings are what are excluded.
Kristen, we looked at this for MWELO quite a bit, and I believe the point is that it's I could be wrong, but for MWELO, the point is the HOA has common areas that are usually ornamental in nature, like space filling, ground cover that's not recreational, not designated recreation. So I think that is probably the parts of an HOA turf areas that would be most likely the ones that should be looked at, rather than a designated like playing field within an HOA, because some HOAs have a lot of extensive grounds with designated recreation areas and pools and so on. So it'd be the smaller common areas that are not really functional that would be the appropriate parts to target.
And as I said before, Metropolitan was very clear that in order for us to co-sponsor, we had to have the language that excluded multifamily buildings that weren't part of HOAs. And the reasoning behind that was that you do see those kinds of buildings, those apartment buildings in general, that have non-traditional turf grass spaces. So people still use them, even though you may say that wouldn't traditionally be an area that children would play in or that people would use. And so we were trying to adjust for that. Whereas in an HOA situation, as Julie said, there are designated recreational areas. There's more grass area that can be used, and so that's sort of where that split came from. I don't know if that helps. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And then Cooper, I know you have a lot of concerns in this first part, and yeah, it is a lot to digest, and that is why we're kind of getting in front of this early to figure out how we help our customers get the resources, etc. But keeping it a little bit more specific, are there trees within turf areas? Can these areas be continue to be irrigated by overhead spray according to the bill? I'm going to leave that to you, Krista.
Yeah. So according to the bill, if you are protecting tree health, you can continue to irrigate. Again, I'm hopeful that the state board, when they put out the regulation, they have some parameters around that in terms of how much you can irrigate and you know what sort of time frame. But we don't know for sure. Right now the bill just says that if you need it to maintain tree health, to make sure the trees don't die, that you can continue to irrigate the grass. So there is that language in there.
Okay, I think we're a little bit over time, so we're just going to take this one last question. Tom White, my client has 60,000 square feet lawn. Could we create wide paths and keep them turf? They'd be functional.
So like a turf path and
Turf path, yeah.
and then the rest of it is something else?
Yeah, I guess so. I think it's a workaround. That sounds like a workaround, Tom. And if you really think that's going to work, a workaround, yes. I don't know.
Ultimately, that will be up to the state board.
If they're really paths, and they're going to turn into probably dirt, and you don't have to maintain them, and maybe you want to just put down DG if people are using them as a pathway. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. I know there's a lot to think about, a lot to plan for, network, take part in Valley Water Symposium and Allied, and we are available for you to talk about. We just wanted to get that out there because we know there's a lot of planning involved in figuring this out. And we thank you so much for participating today. We will be sending the follow-up presentation and links. And thank you so much to our panelists, Julie, Krista, Karina, and Erin, for all your great information, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.